Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to episode 141 of Let's Talk Assassin's Creed. This week, well, we're recording on the 21st of July, and if you're following the AC15 event, this week is Unity Week, my favourite week, but we're not talking about Unity. We are talking about Assassin's Creed Origins, and in particular, we're talking about how the game changed the formula, how it kind of rebooted some of the storylines, how it rebooted the gameplay, how it took a very new approach to the structure of these games. And for this conversation, which I'm really looking forward to, especially as a relatively new fan and new player of these games, we've got a special guest joining us for the first time. Dylan, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. How you doing?
We're good. It's good to have you here. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, Dylan.
Sure. So my name's Dylan. You might know me online as Turl. I am most well known for being a Assassin's Creed Reddit moderator. I was like the lead moderator or head moderator for like 4 or 5 years. I since kind of stepped away from that position and given it to another moderator. But I'm still on the team. I was a member of the now defunct Mentors Guild, but now part of the new Star Player thing. I don't know, but
I was going to say at this point, gentlemen, raise your hats to pay respects.
But I've done a variety of other things around the community. Done some podcasts here and there, some videos, some handful of live streams. As part of the Mentors Guild, I was part of multiple trips to the studios there, where I was able to see early versions of some of the recent releases and give my feedback. So yeah, that's just a little bit about my very nerdy passion.
Love it. Sounds great. Did you get any good swag?
Yeah, I did. I mean, let's see. I've got an Altair figurine. We've got a limited edition bust of Old Man Altair. I've got signatures from every dev you could think of. I've T-shirts, yada yada. You name it. We got a decent amount of free swag, but I also bought a lot of cool swag. I bought more than I got, that's for sure.
Is there a most treasured possession in your collection?
Oh man, that Altair, the Mentors Guild, so all the mentors got a custom made bust of Old Man Altair, and it's just really nice, and that might be it, but probably I've got this AC encyclopedia from like the old days, from like 2012 or something like that goes up to like AC3, but it's got just signatures all over the back and front from tons of different developers, like Jean Godin, the creative director of Origins and Black Flag. He recently left the studio, the art director, I'm forgetting his name.
Raphael
Lacoste. Yes, I've even got Abu, the voice of Bayek, on there. I've got Adewale. I've got just tons of the ComDev team, Amar. I've just got all these different signatures, and it was really cool because not only is it from people that I like, thought highly of, and did Darby sign? I think Darby signed it too. He's on there. But a lot of these people were people I got to meet and hang out with and become friends with. So that's it. That's my most prized one for sure.
Very nice, very nice.
Yeah.
I have only one signed bit of. We're a bit off topic already. Who cares? I have only one signed bit of memorabilia. So unfortunately, I only started playing these games just before COVID. So the opportunity to go to any sort of Comic-Con events hasn't really presented itself. But I did go to a small Comic-Con event here in the UK, and we met, my daughter and I, because we're both big Odyssey fans. She's played it through, I think, 2-3 times. She loves that game. We met Michael and Melisanthe. So I do have the Odyssey art book where they've signed the artwork pictures of their characters. in the art book, which is a nice little memento that I will keep as well. Declan, you got the bust, I think, of Altair. Is that right as well?
I do indeed. He's upstairs looking proudly on my shelf next to
Nice.
my Ezio statue that I also got from the Mentos Guild.
Oh, you got Ezio as well. Oh, excellent.
Yes,
Oh, yeah. I was supposed to get one of those, but it got lost in the postage somewhere.
No.
It's out there somewhere. Somewhere got it. Someone got it. That wasn't me.
My dice went
Sorry.
missing. I was supposed to get dice.
Oh, the
and they went
dice.
missing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My God, I'm sad.
Yeah. I at least got the.
mind.
I got the Christmas jumper before Christmas time, so that worked out.
Oh, that jumper's
Forgot
awesome. I've
about
seen
that.
so many people wearing that.
Yeah,
Pictures
it's
of people
pretty
wearing
cool.
it. It's great.
Very comfortable.
I got that in April, and the disappointing part is it's great and I love it. I'm a little bit too fat to wear it. It's a medium. I need large.
Well, you know what? It's just inspiration for you, you know.
Mm.
One day.
I think the problem is I'm 5'11", so when I put it on, I look pregnant, so I need to lose weight. That's fine, but it's also a little bit too small. So I don't mind. I still adore it. It just sits there. I'm gonna frame it one day. Perfect.
Yeah.
I mean, the solution to the problem here, Declan, is I'm a little bit shorter than you. So, just help me out here. Send it over. I'll take care of it for you. Problem solved. Or not. Okay, fine. Right, moving
It'll be
on.
your birthday present.
Before we crack on with the main topic, I've got one final memory that's popped into my head, Dylan. Were you part of the marathon team that used to run every year? Is that right?
I actually was. I don't know if I was ever officially part of it, but it was. It was really ingrained with the Reddit team. Big shout out to Treviso, one of the other moderators who, was totally leading that effort. And so basically, kind of just started out as just something that they came to Reddit and the Reddit mod. Hey, we like to do this marathon? Can you guys help us out? Absolutely. That ran for years at a time, and by the end it was definitely getting more difficult to handle, because it was like how do you even do a marathon with these at that time? I think it was including Origins and Odyssey and the DLCs, right, which are just massive. So I don't know if they plan on picking that project back up, but no, I was never officially part of it. I helped out.
Gotcha.
Things here and there, but yeah.
I know why they stopped, and I totally respect the reason that they stopped.
Agreed,
makes perfect sense to me. It is a bit of a shame, because it was a nice celebration of opportunity to replay and reminisce over your favorite memories, favorite sequences, all the rest of it. I have seen White Wolf Whisper's planning spreadsheets, because I think she did the planning for the Odyssey section. And it's a beast. There's no other way to describe it.
Yes, I don't even know how you handle it, because too much work for me.
Yeah, indeed. Well, I'll tell you what, let's jump off from Odyssey and start talking about Origins. And the reason I'm going to jump off like that is my backstory is I picked up Odyssey as the first game in the franchise. Played it about 6 months after release. Loved it, thought it was a great adventure, never played anything like it. And then I moved to Origins, because at that time I didn't really understand about the modern day thing and how that is the kind of chronological part you're supposed to follow. So I thought, well, I've finished with Greece. I'll jump forward, 400 years, and we'll go and explore Egypt. And to me, again, someone going into this stuff totally new, I have to say, it took me a little bit of time to adapt to Origins, especially with the opening few hours where the time jumps around between flashbacks and so on. But I may get some negative comments here. We'll see how it goes. But it felt to me like Origins was a rougher beta version of Odyssey. But eventually I adapted to it, played it through, enjoyed it, all the rest of it. What I'm curious about for you two who've been playing these games for many, many years, did you know that this game was going to be formulated structured in a totally different way, totally new approach, or was it a complete surprise on release day that there was this epic scale world? The DNA memory tracker had gone. How was your first impressions when you first started playing?
Do you want me or Declan go first?
Oh, Dylan, take it away, mate. Yeah.
Sure. So I've kind of got a unique perspective on this because I was one of the mentors that visited Ubisoft Montreal before the game even leaked or announced or anything. And so before we even played the game, we got, a all day rundown of here's what Origins is. At the time was known as Empire. And, you know, they told us about, the characters and the new movement and combat system, how they were moving away from memory sequences and optional objectives, and how they were moving into like a quest system, and it was going to be this big game, and really it was kind of I don't know if it was shocking, but it was, everyone who was in the room was kind of like uneasy about it, right? We're like, what? Like, you're getting rid of all of these pillars, or this thing, that the structure we're so used to at this point, because it's been 10 games. And so I think it was I don't want to say off-putting, but it was definitely like a strange experience to be like, oh, okay, so this is like, they're totally breaking the doors off and they're ripping everything down to the studs, which is pretty much what they did. Yeah, they rebuilt almost everything. But I I have complicated opinions on the RPG games, but I also think that moving away, there's a lot of stuff in those legacy games that to me were not that great to begin with and have not aged well since. So there's good and bad in a lot of the changes that they decide to be like, all right, this is how we're going to build Assassin's Creed going forward. So
did they say why they wanted to sort of rip the formula apart and rebuild it and discard major chunks of it, or was it just a case of, we think it's time for a change?
Well,
or was it
I think
based
it was
on market research or player feedback? Or
so there's a lot. There's a lot there. Okay, so to me, in general, Ubisoft as of late has been doing a lot of trying to emulate a lot of other games, right? Like, they'll see something that they're inspired by, or they think, that would do great in the current market, and they'll try to make something similar, right? And they're not the only studio to do that. Like, Blizzard does this all the time, where they see a game or a trend and then they do it, but then they go and make it and they kill it, right? And so Ubisoft kind of has a similar approach to a lot of its games, or at least recently. And so I think they were kind of like, especially with how Syndicate was received and Unity was received, they're like, you know what, this is just like not working for us. We need to rethink this. What are we inspired by? What are players interested in? Which at the time was like, when would that have been? Like, the big games at the time, I think, were like The Witcher 3, or the Souls games weren't quite as big as they are now, but they were starting to like catch steam, right? Of people were starting to talk about them and play them, becoming more than a niche type series. And I also remember thinking back to this. It was either Jean or Ash or both of them said something like, we found that a lot of the kind of RPG and exploration elements that we did in Black Flag are really well received by the players, and something we really enjoyed working on. So to me, Origins is like a spiritual successor to what Black Flag was, where there's like tons of exploration. It's a little more open-ended. There's huge, player space. There's at the time, I don't think we really considered it, but the ship kind of had some customization RPG elements where you could level it up and you could add cannons, or you could increase the hull, or all that stuff. And so a lot of those ideas, I think, kind of fed into what they wanted to do with Origins. I think they were really trying to modernize Assassin's Creed at the time, from what I remember.
What did you think, Declan? Because you didn't have early release. You through the Mentors Guild at that point, so you would have played it, I guess, on release day or soon after. How did you feel when you first started up this new Assassin's Creed?
Okay, so this is where everyone gets the pitchforks and torches ready to come after me, but I played it a few months after it came out, thanks to a Christmas present off my partner Nana, and booing it up, I just kind of screamed for joy, because it was as if they finally fixed Assassin's Creed. And I know I'm going to get a lot of stick for that, but I didn't like, prior to Unity, how a lot of the world was blocked off by memory restrictions. I understood the reason and the law behind it, but I wanted to explore Rome and AC3 on my own and just have some fun, but no, you're restricted to doing it by memory. And then Unity and Syndicate released that, and it wasn't. And then you got Origins that give you that historical playground for the first time in all of its majesty. It was epic, and that was nice. And not having so many, like, probably I have Assassin's Creed prior to Origins is you spend a lot of time in the menu looking at like the memories, what objectives, what the secondary objectives, how to get sync. With Origins, you can just play the story, and that's what I loved. I could just play the story, and I think I just did. I just played the story, and it was great. And they finally fixed combat as well. I hated pre-Unity combat because I just don't like the counter system personally.
Really?
Yeah,
See, I'm replaying Brotherhood right now because I want to do the DLC content before it gets disabled. Thanks, Ubisoft. And I'm loving the counter kill and the chain kills. It's ridiculously overpowered. You get one counter kill timed right, which is not difficult, and you cut down 10 guards in a row. It's hilarious, but it's so much fun. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it was too easy, but and I guess maybe after 6 or 7 games all using the same system, it does get a bit boring. But I have to say, at the moment, I'm having a great time with the older melee combat system from Brotherhood. But isn't it funny that you started with AC1 and played all the way through, and you prefer a lot of the things from the newer games? I started with the newest games, and I'm kind of leaning more towards some of the older approaches to how these games are structured and so on.
I think it's because the issue I have with the older structure is it's good. In Assassin's Creed 1 it was good, Assassin's Creed 2 it was good, but when you play them chronologically, if you were to like erase your memory and then play from 1 to Odyssey, what you'll notice is that all the games evolve. They all do something to evolve. But the one thing that never truly evolved was combat. And it was weird that the bare bones combat was there all the way up until Black Flag. And it was weird because of the brutality of Connor's movement. It was weird that Connor would just still stand still and wait for enemies to attack. That was just weird. By that point, you would expect it to be a hitbox system where you would dodge and you would physically attack because it was a dodge function. But no, you just stood there like a lemon waiting for everyone to rush you like some cheesy action movie. And then Black Flag had this huge potential with the dual sword system to have fast, really fun combat. Again, no, you could stand on a beach like a lemon, wait for 100 pirates to rush you, and you look like an absolute idiot. And, you know, Unity was great for not having that. You know, you could stand still and counter, but it was boring, so you had to go seek the movement, dodge in the field, and that made you feel like an assassin. Like, when you read the comic, the books, they don't just stand there and wait for people to rush them. They actually engage them in combat. So, yeah, I kind of don't like the old combat for that. I prefer the
Fair enough
RPG one.
I think I have to agree with Declan. I think a lot of the old... I mean, Brotherhood might be an exception because that was the peak easy mode. I think everyone had a lot of fun with that, right? But it did have that problem of being too easy, and so that was something that was a huge part of what they wanted to change with Origins. Was that Assassin's Creed had always been an animation based combat system, and so the way that fights would play out is, you know, if you press the button at the right time, the animation would play in a correct way, and you had to be within the right distance or whatever. And so that was a huge, I remember this, they specifically talked about it, a huge change. It took a lot of work apparently to change to what they called hitbox. And so that's what we have with Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla is, you know, as long as you're hitting the enemy's box, like, you'll be doing damage. There's not as much, I don't know, ballerina dancing with the animation stuff to, you know, make sure that the combat was, you know, working. Honestly, I think that was probably like a huge part of like why they wanted to restart, was like this animation, like, you know, it's worked in the past, and like the series went on for so long that it was going for different trends at different times. Like, you know, some of the games are very cinematic, where at the time the biggest games were like Uncharted 2 or whatever, right? Like these super linear games. And so then you get stuff like AC3 where it's like super linear, but it's like it doesn't work with like some of the mission design is just overly linear, and then it doesn't totally jive with the open world. And so yeah, I think that was a huge part of them wanting to revamp, was like, you know, we just have all this old legacy stuff from these games that we made almost 10 years ago. It's like, why are we still using this stuff, you know? So I get it, why they went in the direction they did.
Yeah. Is there anything you think was scrapped that I mean, it sounds like a refresh was needed, which is fair enough, but was there anything that you wish had been kept as part of that sweeping out of all the cobwebs?
Absolutely. I hope I make this clear enough, because I feel like it's something I reiterate all the time, but it doesn't ever get through. It's like the complete lack of like level design that's friendly for parkour or opportunities or missions designed around it or anything, or even a parkour system that helps supports that. There's no puzzles. There's no, like, all that was the basis of the gameplay of those older games, was like, you know, you would do fights and you would find things and you would assassinate, but like the minute to minute gameplay is you running across the rooftops and scaling up walls and going down them, and like that is like that is what you're doing most of the time. That is most of the gameplay. And so for them to just kind of like, you know, we're not really going to focus on this anymore, because it was always something that like was just tricky to, you know, work with, and you know, you had to design your environments a lot smaller, and they had to be a lot more bespoke, and we can't just do, you know, they're doing whole countries now at this point, and so it's harder to design for that. But that was like, to me, that's like the biggest sin of the new games, is them just like, we're not even really gonna focus on parkour. The other part of that is like the stealth gameplay in Assassin's Creed games has never been like super advanced. Like everyone's always calling, like, they're stealth games, like, sure, but they're more of like action stealth. They're more like adventure stealth, where there's light elements in here. You're not going to play out like a Deus Ex or something. There's just not as much. There's not enough like systems and tools to like help support like super true stealth. But you know, there's like no, in the newer games, there's like no tools for stealth. Like smoke bombs are like completely they're barely there. They're not useful. There's not a lot of like ways to distract enemies. There's not the social stealth, you know, is just completely gone, which again was another major part. The other major part next to, you know, parkour, was like parkour and social stealth. Those were your two major methods of getting around the game, and neither of them are present. So for them to like abandon the assassin fantasy, I think is why so many of the, you know, the people that have played since the beginning, you know, might like some of the newer games, or at least tolerate them, but are not like the biggest fans, because they're not representing that archetype.
Something that again, I'm still learning all of this stuff, having only played through all of the older games over the last 18 months, I guess now. I recently finished a replay of Origins because I wanted to go back and replay it. So I've played it the whole story through twice. And I thought, I'm still actually quite enjoying it. I'm going to do a New Game Plus. So I started a New Game Plus, and on that playthrough, I've reached as far as Shadia. What I realised, and it never really sank in before, is especially on a New Game Plus when you've upgraded various gear and whatever, although it doesn't matter too much in Origins, but the assassinations are so fast. Like the bathhouse assassination, is it Eudorus, I think, in Alexandria? It takes about 2 minutes. You go in the door, you go left, you go up over the ruse, you kill him, you go back up over the ruse, and you're out and you're done. The assassinations, this is something that's only just occurred to me in the last few days, thinking about it in readiness for this episode, that the assassination used to be the big point you were leading up to over multiple memories, maybe many hours of gameplay. Like you said, you would use parkour or interesting approaches to the target, kill the target, escape, hopefully undetected if you can. If you mess up, well, you replay it, and you keep replaying it because it's fun to replay it and find new routes, or it's fun to set yourself challenges like don't get detected or kill all the guards or whatever. But you don't have that replayability. But also they're over so fast, and I can't really describe the epiphany that I had is that the importance of the actual assassination has been reduced because it's so easy. I don't know. I don't think I'm an especially skilled player either, so I don't think I'm speaking out of turn like I'm bragging that I'm amazing. But it's it's just a funny structure.
No, and I know what you mean. And I think that's maybe this isn't. Unity is a weird game that has a slight cult following, but was like when it launched, it was a disaster. And it, like,
I'm in that cult. Don't worry. Carry on.
To be honest, I'm not going to say it almost sank the brand, but it was like it's still the game that is like the one of the major turning points around like of like where Assassin's Creed is at this point.
Yeah.
But what's so crazy about that game is like it offers an amazing assassin fantasy when it works, right? Like when everything decides that it wants to cooperate with you. And it's got these black box missions where, it plays a lot like a Hitman level. Like you're kind of scoping out the environment. You're looking at where your opportunities are. You could go in here, you could go in there. They have unique assassinations for all these different targets. They're at like they're on this grand scale, like, the first one's in Notre Dame. And then there's one that's at like, I don't know, like some sort of bourgeois dinner party or something. And there's like fireworks going on outside or something like that.
Yep.
There's the Rat King who's down in the basement, right? And they try to do that in some of the like in Origins and Valhalla, not so much in Odyssey. That game doesn't really try to do that at all.
No, it doesn't.
But it's a totally different thing. But those experiences they made like very bespoke. Like they really spent the time to like design out the environment and like where the enemies, like what the enemy patterns are going to be and what the target pattern is going to be. And we're gonna set this thing up so you can get this key to go here, right? And the new games just don't have that same level of like piece placing. There's just we have AI that goes on a pattern that is like maybe they'll be sleeping or maybe they'll be peeing or maybe they're riding their horse around or something, which is like interesting. And so if you could combat at different times of day, you can kind of see how like maybe the guards are asleep. But at the end of the day, like you said, it doesn't really take very long no matter what you do. You can kind of just find the path of least resistance to get in, do the thing, and then leave. And so there's not quite as much like planning or preparation. I never really got that same sense like you're talking about.
edge of your seat, like, have I messed this up? Am I going to get detected and have to abort, or fight my way through it?
And in that failure state, that was a big reason they left the whole memory structure and stuff, and like the desynchronization. They got rid of that because it was kind of frustrating. Like, you would fail and it'd be like, oh, you're detected, reboot, or oop, you're detected, like, we're gonna make you start over. And like, that just sucks, right? No one wants to be forced to start over. But a large part of the new stuff is, what, we're this world is just living, and what happens, and you kind of just, you have to fight your way out if you don't do so well stealth, which is good because the combat is better than it was. But
yeah,
I totally get what you mean. Sorry, I was kind of long-winded there.
No, hey, that's what we're here for. It's all good. Go on, Declan.
I was just going to say on this point, I think it's just literally hit the point now where balancing is impossible. Like, 15 years the game's been out, so by Origins it was out for near enough about 11 years. So at that point, you're releasing a game and you've got to juggle stealth, parkour, level design, all without making the game feel repetitive and stale. Because, not to be rude, by the time you played Syndicate, a lot of the games just felt very same. So you've got Origins that is trying to break the mold, which it did succeed, but then it's falling into the issue of, is it working? Should we put stealth in to be a lot harder and a lot more a lot difficulter? Yes, in some situations it would have been fun, but then again, how many people are gonna find it quite irritating that half of the map has now been dropped random pieces for stealth or for parkour that shouldn't really be there? So it's an impossible balancing act, but in my opinion, I think what the last 3 games have done is kind of more respectful to humanity than any other game. Because technically, would Bayek really hide in every single bush he sees? Maybe not. Would Eivor backflip, backjump, somersault over every building she sees? Maybe not. So maybe making them systems take a step back creates more character realism. But pitchforks, people, pitchforks.
Well, I think the point you're trying to make is kind of like, the characters they chose and the roles that they chose don't really fit with the assassin, which to me is fine. It makes sense. Like, they've built these systems around things that are focused on combat and exploration and stuff. And so Bayek is basically he's a sheriff, right? Like, he's a medjay, so he's out helping people. And are sheriffs usually stealthing around? Probably not. They're usually, they're in their car, and you can see them on the corner, and they make themselves very visibly known. And a mercenary, maybe their tactics change, but at the time of an Odyssey, they were fighting in large battles with in formation. And so, like, is stealth gonna, would someone really be stealthing? I guess, like, and then Eivor is a Viking, so obviously, like, they are guerrilla fighters, more or less. And she picks up some skills, but yeah, I mean, they very purposefully designed around a lot of the changes that they made, which have been, I guess, successful. I mean, these games have all sold well, and they've all been pretty critically did critically well. Nothing like, I think AC2 or Black Flag are still the 2 like highest critically rated, and so none of the previous games quite reached those expectations. But yeah,
I think it's a hard one because we are in industrial age now for gaming where it is all about open worlds, and back then AC2 and Black Flag, they kind of didn't fit the typical mold, so they did their own thing. And it's a problem now that Assassin's Creed is trying to create more diversity stories. So Eivor's not an assassin, she's a sage, so her story can't be like every other game. Same with Bayek, he's a Magi who's creating the hidden ones. But at the same time, do you make it linear? Nobody really likes linear games that much these days. Some do, some don't. So it's basically, I'm not defending Ubisoft's like actions like, oh, big open world filler. It's like you're in an industry, you're always trying to fight for competition. So in the last 3 games, even the next game going forward, will they be able to ever hit Black Flag and AC2 success? No, because in that 360 age, there was so much diversity in gaming that they stood out. Whereas, really now, after the 360 age, every game's just pretty much similar. But I'm not an industrial expert, so I'm unsure if I'm right.
Well, I mean, based on the trends of the last few days, the next Assassin's Creed game will need to feature a cat as the playable character.
Well, it's a cat playable character. I say there's been a couple of games with cats in it already. They beat the curve with that one, you know.
They could, and I'm not. Everyone's gonna like be angry at me, but they could add a cat that you could see through his eyes and walk around, and it would still fit into the.
Now that is actually a cool idea, Declan. Actually, I totally agree. They do it with Eagle Vision. Why can't they do it with a cat?
Good point.
Someone I was in Discord with the other day said Stray has better parkour than the new AC games.
See, I've been watching some footage today, and I have to say the movements of that cat, the animations, it's beautiful. Yeah. It really is. I mean, and they've designed the world for it, so every ledge is the right height for that cat to do a jump up, jump down, and they've used planks and air conditioning units and little ledges for that. It's amazing. It really is.
So on about like the cat, I think this has been an interesting one for both Dylan and James to think about. Is people really complain about Senu in Origins because they think, oh my god, Eagle Vision, you're meant to be like see shadows and different perspectives, you don't see through an actual animal. But canonically, the transmedia does state that Connor's daughter did see through an eagle when a wolf attacked Connor by a river. So, canonically, Bayek was the first person to see through the eyes of an animal before Odyssey came out. So, does that mean that Eagle Vision originated from being able to see through the eyes of an animal before it evolved to something different?
Well, I don't know someone knows the answer to this, and it's not exactly me, but I do believe that Eagle Vision is something that involves the senses, right? And so it can kind of manifest, in the way that we know it, the traditional way, or the way that you can just physically see through an eagle. Or I'm not even still totally sure how it works, but I don't know if they totally went into that. I don't remember it really being totally explained. It's like, oh, you can see through the eagle now because of Eagle Vision, right? Everyone's okay, great. Everyone's bought in. But I was playing it last night, and I was actually getting really frustrated with it. I was like, okay, I'm going up to a camp. All right, I want to know where the enemies are. Oh wait, let me pull out my eagle. And I have to fly up. I have to use the little compass to find, the enemies around the camp. And here's this. And back then, it was 5 years ago. It was cool, right? It was like, whoa, this is new, and you can see all the enemies and plot them out and stuff. And now I just am annoyed by it. I guess I've just done it so many times. I've done it, thousands and thousands of times at this point. But that was something at the time that, again, they really broke the mold with it. That we want to get away from this Eagle Vision thing. We want to do something different. I don't know how they came about the idea of it. I'm not sure, but I do believe it was something that was maybe done before Primal, something they were looking at or thinking about, and maybe another team adopted it. I can't remember for sure, but I'm glad by the Valhalla they realized, okay, maybe we need to bring back the old kind of system, because I liked a lot more being able to, while I'm in the moment, being able to see where my enemies are, instead of having to stop before every single thing and scope it out. And so Now I remember. I'm remembering now why they decided to go with this direction. Okay, so we were talking about this earlier, James, where when you've going back to these old games and the assassinations are like big and important, and there's tons of lead up to it and missions, and a large part of that was you would, before you go into an assassination, you would probably be up high on a building somewhere, maybe a viewpoint or maybe just somewhere nearby, and you were scoping it out, right? You would be seeing, here's the enemies here, and maybe if I eagle vision, I can see a little bit more, but here are my entrances and stuff. And in Origins, you can't do that because there's just like no buildings around, right? Like there's a couple of cities and they have some of that. That's sometimes, but most of the time you're out in the middle of the desert and you're going up on a camp or a fort or something. And so that scoping out was just not possible because there's no buildings around. And so they're like, how do we get up in the air? Who can see up in the air? What do we do? Oh, an eagle. An eagle can see. Yeah, that's how it came about. Because I was like, I can't remember how they came about this. And so I think that's my guess, right? I'm thinking that's what I remember. But that was like their solution to everything is, there's a lot more flat ground. There's not as much, there's not as many places to perch up. I mean, they've got mountains and stuff and different viewpoints, but it's not like Unity or Syndicate or AC1 or what have you.
Yeah. Go on, Declan.
I have just had a really stupid but funny brainwave for an Eagle Vision theory that I'm just going to share. What if technically Eagle Vision originated from seeing through the eyes of an eagle because of, as you described, there's not much vantage points. But over time, assassins train themselves to use eagles less because you can get spotted, just how they realized don't cut off your finger, that's how you're going to get spotted. So over time they trained their senses to work without a companion like an eagle. And the reason why Eivor has two is because Eivor's never trained, so she's just got an innate ability that some people have. But Odin is trying to show that you can see through your other senses like the Isu did, which is why it's called Odin Vision, because it's Odin's trying to teach you that you can see more than just through the eyes of an eagle. You can use your senses for sight and sound. So what if seeing through the eagle was the original Eagle Vision, but we grew out of it because, as you said, when you can climb top of a viewpoint, you don't need an eagle. So they started to use climbing viewpoints to maybe honor their old tradition of using eagles.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah. Could be.
I play these games too much.
No, it's fine. No, not at all. It's interesting theory crafting. Maybe it was.
Sorry, go
ahead. No, you go.
I was thinking when you said about the evolution of Senu to Ikaros to Sunin, and when I first started Valhalla on release day, and you get to the first little location on one of the islands up in Norway, and my approach in the newer games has always been put the eagle up, tag all the enemies, and then because you then get the outline, you can plot your path through the location. You can be sneaky, you can use cover, you can sprint between buildings, and you can be, because I having played some of the games up to Valhalla, I think I played 4 of the games before I started Valhalla. I really wanted to approach this game as an assassin. I really wanted to build on everything I'd learned in some of the other games. And the eagle is a key part of my approach, right? Because once I've tagged all the enemies and I can see them, I can work my way around and I can work out when to leap out of the bushes and stab someone and drag them into the bushes and then wait for the next guard to walk past or whatever. And of course, Sunin doesn't do what the other games had done, which I found quite frustrating. And I would just end up spamming Odin's sight, which is also not especially satisfying. But I did have a thought, which is maybe they nerfed it, like you said, Dylan, because they felt it was a little overpowered or a little bit stale, and they wanted the player to maybe just use observation more, not just use the overpowered eagle drone. But also I was wondering if I feel like the team that worked on Valhalla, whether it was the same people or whether it was they just wanted to sort of build a bit of a connection between Valhalla and AC1. It felt to me like the way that Sunin worked and the way that you kind of tagged enemies and so on, it was almost like a halfway point between the abilities we had in Origins, sort of thinking chronologically, and the way that Eagle Vision worked in AC1 and onwards. Because it does kind of strike that balance between, yes, you can see some stuff, but no, you don't have this sort of flying drone over your target zone. And I wondered if they were trying to almost draw like a thematic midpoint between the two approaches. I don't know if that's true or not, just something that occurred to me. But anyway.
Yeah, no, so I'll kind of expound on that myself, the small amount that I know, but so there's not a lot of people that worked on AC1 to Valhalla because it was a 12-year difference. I don't know. Most of those people have left Ubisoft, I think there was maybe a handful. I do know, I believe, I knew his name as Fizzbot on Twitter. I believe he worked on a lot of some of the really early AC stuff, maybe AC1, but he was a level design director for Valhalla, I believe. But Valhalla is very much an homage to AC1 in a lot of different ways, right? So the 3 cities that you do assassinations in, those are all homages to 3 of the assassinations that you do in AC1. One is in Accra, Jerusalem, and the third's in Damascus. I can't remember exactly who does what, but the assassinations like literally play out the exact same way. So there's like,
I was going to say, I think that's it. Some of the targets in Valhalla have been kind of given almost like the same character or the same backstory, if you like.
Very similar, yeah. So like one of them is there's a party and the host feeds its guest poisonous wine, and another is around this kind of book burning, I don't know, cult, but like a religious group, and you assassinate the leader of this, and then the other one. Oh no, I'm gonna Declan, get the pitchforks out. Someone's gonna kill me because I should know these, but like I'm not the biggest AC1 fan, so like I don't really.
Abu Makud, I think, was the guy that poisoned the wine, wasn't he, in AC1?
Something, yes. I don't remember any of their names. I don't remember much of that.
That's the only one I can remember.
There's vague images in my brain of that game, but there's other things like the assassins themselves have on the robes that are very reminiscent of like the Altair, and I can't remember if they were coming from Masyaf or if Masyaf had yet to be established, but and there's even in the beginning fight when Hytham tries to assassinate the bad guy, I forget his name. He does the exact same move that we see in the AC. We see Altair do in the original AC1 trailer, and it's like this cool moment, but it doesn't work, and Hytham just gets thrown to the side, and it's this immediate message to the player, like, nope, that's not going to work here. You're in a new place, brother. Like, this is where the Vikings are, and they will destroy you if you just try to come up with your tiny little blade, right? But there's definitely was an attempt to not only tie across all the other games, right? Like there's a little bit of each game narratively, at least. In like there's something that's tying up from something in the past, but it's the game that is closest in time to AC1, and it kind of serves as a prequel to that of that time of the Assassin's Brotherhood, which were still the Hidden Ones, I believe, at the time. But yes, you are correct to see like, oh yes, they are trying to kind of bridge that gap. Some successfully in some cases, very unsuccessfully in other cases, but like even the way that a lot of the social stealth elements work, right? You hide with I believe you can hide with monks again.
Yes.
It's the first time since AC1. So yeah, there's definitely like an attempt to like kind of even the aesthetic, right? And the music they have, Yes for Kid back. They definitely try to like kind of bring back that like kind of cold and gross and kind of sad just aesthetic and feel that is still really beautiful. So yeah,
I remember when we interviewed Darby, he said he spotted a comment on the subreddit sometime after Valhalla's release, and someone had said this is a post-apocalyptic game, and Darby went, "Yep, that's exactly what we were going for." It's supposed to be a bit of a wasteland almost.
They really wanted you to get a sense of what it was like after the Roman Empire fell, right? Like when all of that order and society is built up, and then it just gets, obliterated, right? In large part because of the assassins themselves, right? Is what happens. Yeah. And you live in ruin, and there's these small warring factions and stuff. So we're supposed to be talking about Origins.
We are, but tangents are fine. And I was going to come back to Origins in a second. I'll just make one final comment about Valhalla. And another thought I had. I've never shared this with you, Declan. So this is a lot of sharing going on tonight. It almost feels, again, partly just because of the timeline. The 880s is the closest in time we've come to the events of Assassin's Creed 1. And with Origins telling us the founding of the Hidden Ones, more on that topic in a minute, and with Valhalla showing us how Alfred kind of rebuilt or reorganized the Order of the Ancients into the Templars. And of course, as you say, the game revisits ideas and sort of mirrors certain things from the very first game. We've even got Desmond's audio recordings on the laptop between conversations between him and Sean, and it almost feels like you could wrap the entire franchise up there because you've gone full circle. You've had this epic conflict over 1,000 years. We've gone right back to the early foundings of these secret organizations and how they came to be. And yeah, we've closed that historical circle. It almost felt like you could end the current timeline there and even just start again with something entirely new or another soft reboot. That was a thought I had at the end of Valhalla anyway. Of course they won't, because hey, there's always more games to make and more stories to tell. But that was just something that occurred to me. But I want to go back to Origins because something this wasn't obvious to me when I first played it because I didn't know about the transmedia and some of the established lore. But Origins telling us the founding of the Hidden Ones kind of disagrees with other pre-existing stories, I think. For example, characters like Iltani, who we only know from transmedia, I think. What do you think about that, Dylan? Was it
was that a question for me?
Sorry, it was. I didn't make it very clear. Was it an acceptable story to tell that way, or did it kind of throw out some existing?
Oh, it was kind of a disaster.
we're going right in. Cool.
I don't know how else to put it. It was
go for it. Go for it.
Profoundly disappointing to the way that Origins handled not only its storytelling between its characters, but the establishment of the Brotherhood and the effect that it has on the lore. And Odyssey did some left turn at another point and then tried to reconnect it with the DLC. The founding of...
Well, I think we need to get some tea and popcorn at this point. Dylan, you have the floor.
So Origins should have been, in my opinion, a rediscovery of the Brotherhood, right? Something that has been long dormant and, maybe all of its members died or there's only a few left and they're just, they're out in hiding, kind of like George Lucas's The Jedi, right? They were once a great power or something and now they've, gone away. But that was kind of what my expectation was, right? But they really did set it up as this is the beginning of the Brotherhood. And we don't really have a tie to any other, history or prehistory, which is insane because that was only 2,000 years ago. And in AZ's lore, humanity, the Tatoba catastrophe was 50,000 years, right? So that's a long time for there just to be no, like, not necessarily a brotherhood, but some sort of faction or belief system, or it's codified or whatever, of what, the idea of the assassins, which is a lot of things, but it's mostly about the idea that humanity is best served when humans have free will. So, that is their guiding principle. They have, ways of exacting their philosophy is just questionable or whatever. But that was, it's established in 74 BC, which is crazy. And we don't really get a sense of, like there's other assassins that came prior to this, right? I'm forgetting their names, but you've seen them in the vault, and they've got the logo on their belt, which later was tied. Oh, actually, that was just an artist's interpretation. They added those to those assassins, even though they weren't really assassins, quote, like capital A or Brotherhood assassins. So that was like the first big issue, was they just said it so late and they didn't connect it to this conflict that we had been told has been going on since, humanity began, right? It goes all the way back to Cain and Abel, right? So that was large. But the other part, which I was maybe more disappointed by, was they did not establish the tenets or the creed in the game, like, at all. There's no discussions about, like, staying, hide in plain sight, never compromise the brotherhood. And I'm forgetting my third tenet. I should know this.
Stay the blade from the innocent.
Stay your blade from the flesh of the innocent. Yes. So Bayek already follows that one because he's a Magi. Hiding in plain sight, not really a thing. But and then the creed itself, which is nothing is true, everything is permitted, right? Like this idea that Bayek should have come to the realization, like, that these myths or this religion or these ways that you understand the world are not quite what he thought it was, and can really be used as a tool of, like, manipulation or tool of governance against him. But he never comes to that realization, and he never comes to the fact that, like, I have to kind of choose my own, which he kind of does. They're like, okay, we're gonna start our own thing, right? Like, we are our new purpose is not as Magi's, but as assassins, which it kind of, like, gets to the creed, but, like, they talk about the creed as, like, some weird, like, like monologue about, like, it's mostly just about, like, exacting their revenge, or I don't. I should have rewatched. There's a beach scene at the very end, and it is so difficult to watch because you're, like, waiting for them to be, like, not actually say nothing is true ever repeated, but to come to some of those realizations, and, like, none of that's set up through the game, and none of it's really addressed. And it was like that. Those are the basis of the rest of the Brotherhood. All of the symbolism and the techniques and what they wear and all that is tied back to the creed and the tenets, and none of it's established. So that was sorry for the word vomit. Yeah, Origins is one of my favorite games, and also maybe my most disappointing, for sure.
I have similar thoughts. Might come to that in a minute, but Declan, you've had your hand up for ages, mate. Go ahead.
I don't like doing this because it's not fair, but I actually kind of disagree with Dylan, and I apologize completely. I actually think the origin setup for the Hidden Ones was one of the best things to do, because we know canonically in the lore, and historically, assassins weren't set up to the 11th century in medieval, Assassin's Creed 1 with the assassins. So having an order before the assassins and the hidden ones, it makes complete sense. I think the series before Origins, by saying, hey, there was assassins in the Assassin's time before 11th century, didn't make sense anyway, since the inspiration for assassins was the assassins, which weren't actually a sect till the 11th, till 1009 century. So Assassin's Creed already shot themselves in the foot, in my opinion, by saying, hey, we had assassins at Darius back in ancient Greece, when they're also trying to build that this idea of assassins comes from the assassin in the medieval East. So when they were like, oh, we are the hidden ones, to me it clicked that actually this isn't a unified brotherhood. This is a system that's realizing that the Order of Ancients, which grew in sevens, is something that they need to keep fighting. And I believe that over time, as colonies and trade routes started happening, because you can see in Valhalla with Sigurd bringing Basim, that's a result of like a trade. Sigurd's gone explored, and that naval route has brought Basim and the hidden ones back, and then brings them back to England. It's like a natural order of trade that by Origins time, that when trade was just starting, it feels like maybe all these little sects of hidden ones were just abandoned. And I don't think, in my opinion, that Aya and Bayek may be the first ones to start the tenants. I think they started the foundations, but between Origins and Valhalla, I think that's when they started to unify and bring stuff together, because there is a huge gap between Origins and Valhalla, and by the time you get to Valhalla, they have the robes, they have the hidden blades, and they have the tenants. So I really think that they just grew up over time and started to unify. And I think it would have been a bit more, in my opinion, silly if Origins just basically said, we've made the hidden ones and this is the free tenants, this is the creed. It's a nice little Easter egg, in my opinion, to show that they did continue what Darius did, because Darius was a hidden one, but sort of not a hidden one. It's weird. But then they did have the hidden ones, and then over time they unified through trade routes, started to reach out to more hidden ones, and then by Valhalla's time, everything's just clicked into place, and that's when the tenants started. And it's not until AC1 that they start to unify bigger and go from hidden ones to assassins, and then it's after Assassin's Creed 1 they start to grow the Brotherhood again. So in my opinion, I think Origins did it most respectfully to how I understand the lore, but I don't understand everything in the lore, even after 15 years later.
On my the first time I played it, which was a couple of years ago, I remember getting to the end of the main story, and like Dylan called out, you've got Bayek's "We will found a new creed" speech when he's got the Egyptian priest Pasherenptah there. There's a lady called Tahira there, who, if you don't do the side quest, you won't know why she's there. But anyway, and I forget who else is in the room. And then you've got the beach scene where they kind of don't get on anymore, although that's again not clear. And then it's all over, and you end up the big bad guy is a guy you've never heard of or you've forgotten about because you never see him. And I came away, and I know this is I hate being negative, right? Because just to be clear to you guys and to our listeners, look, I'm an Odyssey fan. I love that game, and I have spent 3 years being told by everyone that it's terrible. And I'm about to become the very thing I swore to destroy, just to mash up two different bloody franchises there. So I hate being negative because there's enough negativity out there, but I guess I have to speak as I find. So I got to the end of Origins the first time I played it and thought, what's just happened? Why aren't they together? Maybe that's a pacing issue, right? Because when I play these games, I love the open world, and I love the question marks, or the glowing dots, or whatever it is, and just what's over there? Let's get on our camel or our horse, or if I'm in Horizon, I'll get on my mechanical horse and I'll ride off and just go and explore. So maybe it's a pacing issue that you can spend 30 hours just exploring, doing side quests, so you just forget what was the story point we were up to and what are we doing next and how did we get here. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to replay it, and I'm really glad I did replay it. And I finished my replay just a few weeks ago. And the main reason I wanted to replay it is Origins is often a game that people hold up as one of their favourites, maybe the favourite of the recent trilogy or one of their sort of top games from the entire franchise. And I just didn't come away with that impression. I thought, well, I need to give it another chance. I also lost my save game randomly, no idea why, lost it completely. So I started a new game, 100%ed the story, and I came away with the same impression, which is, what the heck? Now, I want to try and be fair and balanced, and maybe you guys might remember this and you can correct me if my memory is wrong. I think, well, I know that we had the article from Jason Schreier a couple of years ago that said that the story was changed significantly, but I think also Alex Wilton Regan, the actress who provides the voice and the performance for Aya, I think she's on record as saying that the story and not just individual lines of dialogue, but major plot points were being scrapped, changed, edited whilst they were recording on the motion capture stage in the volume, and that the part that she went for was not the part that she ended up with because of editorial interference. So I don't want to be too harsh on the story, because what I suspect is that had the story followed the originally planned path, we might have had a more coherent set of characters, a more coherent motivation for Aya to found this group that would sort of rise up against tyranny. And maybe the writers did the best they could to kind of stitch together the different threads that had been ripped apart by editorial interference. But then if we just judge the final product, yeah, I came to the end of it thinking, what? They don't get on because they don't? And then Bayek out of nowhere says, we're finding a creed. Okay, great. When did you get that idea? Because again, this is something I only noticed on a replay. I thought after I'd finished that, why not have a series of assassinations where it doesn't go to plan, and therefore through learning, that's how you establish, the rules.
Hide in plain sight. Where you get your tenets, right?
Exactly, because he and Aya, both of them working together, maybe they each take different targets, they gradually learn through screwing up. And that's how they teach themselves and their followers that there's the right way to do things. But no, the game, in fact, the hidden ones is a more interesting exploration of how they operate and why they operate. And there's a little side story where a character called Kawab is hunting Bayek because he was the son of the lizard Tahaka, the guy that's trying to rebuild the city out of the sand. The Scarab, thank you.
Yes.
And that scene between Bayek and Kawab, that's really moving. That's an exploration of why someone might come to understand, have a new knowledge and a new view of the world, and why they might want to join the Hidden Ones, why we fight. And that I felt that little deal, I think that's a fantastic DLC. What is it, 3 or 4 hours of gameplay? It's a more interesting exploration of the founding of the Hidden Ones than large elements of the main game. And I know that's really, really harsh. And like I say, I hate being negative.
I totally agree. I think Hidden Ones, and I talked to devs about it after Origins came out, and I was like, I love Hidden Ones. Like, this is what I wanted from the main game, right? And they're like, yeah, like when we make the game, there's things that we learn along the way, and there's stuff that we want to do, but by the end, sometimes you reflect and you go, wow, we've maybe. And so I think Hidden Ones was kind of an attempt at that, to like, okay, maybe we didn't quite tell the story we were hoping to. And so I think Hidden Ones was, like, to me, Hidden Ones is like my favorite AC thing ever. Sorry, I just interrupted you. But
no, carry on. It's fine. It's fine. Totally. That's what we're here for. Yeah. And to be honest, Curse of the Pharaohs is a little long, but even that's fun because it's all linked to an apple. Happy days. Yeah. We are law compliant, but it's still fun, and it's still an interesting exploration of how people come across these artifacts and misuse them for the right or the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And of course, stunning visually. So,
yes,
two good expansions,
excellent
sure.
environments. Yeah, I totally agree. I think out of the recent games, those are the some of the best DLC. The story in the Pharaohs is not my favorite, but excellent environments. But to kind of get back to what you're talking about with the story, and I'll have to be kind of careful because the longer you stick around AC, the more whispers you hear about details of like what really happened, right? But if you believe the leaks that was Bayek killed, right? And Aya was supposed to take a different part of be a major, or become the protagonist or something like that.
Yeah, that was
maybe midway or halfway or something, yeah. Right? And I don't know if I'm trying to know if people know this, but Darby left the project at one point, right? And so, to me, Origins seems very much like kind of a skeleton put back together or something like that, where they had these ideas with an original thing, and they've written all these scenes, or maybe they've made these assets, or they've designed these missions, right? And they've built some stuff out based around this original, maybe some original concept, right? Which it sounds like Alex says Aya was supposed to have a bigger role. And at some point, maybe they just decided that just wasn't what they want to do, or maybe, I think people were saying, there was people that assumed like, oh, well, it's because I, as a woman, and Ubisoft doesn't like women in its games or being its protagonist, which I agree with that idea. They are not particularly have not been great with their representation of women in their games. In their offices and stuff like that. So they're trying now, but they've been screwing it up. But there could have been other reasons, right? Like maybe it just didn't work out for gameplay reasons. Like, right, like what if you play as Bayek and it's still the RPG, and you've collected these weapons and stuff and these skills, and then he dies, and then you play as Aya the rest of the game. What happens to all that stuff? Is there continuity there? How has she have learned what he has learned, right? If he's dead, or, and so Origins feels like this weird story of like, they have these two characters, and it's a lot like Unity. Aya is more active, right? She's the more active of the two, of the protagonists, and Bayek's kind of following along with her, right? He's on his quest of vengeance mostly, but she's the one kind of leading the charge of like, I want to do something. I want to protect the people of Egypt. I want to devote myself to something new. And then Bayek, the beach scene is like, Bayek's like, why don't we just run off together and we'll just like live our lives somewhere else, and we'll just live happy days. And he's still in the relationship with her, and she has like been gone. She's mentally broken up with him a long time ago, but hasn't really, gotten around to it. And so she's like, you know what? No, let's just be hidden ones. He's like, okay, yeah, sure, let's do that. And so Unity's the same way, right? Like Arno is basically chasing Elise around Paris as she's, trying to find out who murdered her father. And so Origins is very much they brought in a new writer halfway through its game's development, and it shows, right?
Oh, so, did they? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so Darby had originally written some of a script or most of a script or something, and he created Aya and Bayek. He named them and such. He said he's gone on record as so. I don't know if he was there for the casting of Alex or not. Bayek had not been cast at that point, or something like that, or he had maybe been originally cast as somebody else. I can't remember, but they brought in Elaine. So Elaine was the the lead scriptwriter, narrative director on Origins. He also worked on Valhalla, where he was, I believe just like a lead writer, whereas Darby was the narrative director. You know, he's brought back at that point.
Gotcha.
And Elaine, I don't know if he had ever worked on a game before. He was from the theater scene in Montreal, and so I think Elaine brought a ton of like flavor, and like there's like I think the dialogue is like really cool and it sounds awesome, and there's like crazy stuff that happens, like Bayek bashes the guy's head in with an orb, right? And so like there's a lot of there's other poignant moments, right? Like you were talking about with the Scarab's son, and like there's all these like pieces of like cool moments, like where like Bayek chops off his finger, right? But it just doesn't come together in a way that like even like really makes sense for the like the character arcs don't really make sense. The arc of the Brotherhood is just like barely set up, and it all happens right at the end, and it's mostly capped off by these like long monologues. And I hate when the AC games do this. Like everyone really loves like Arno's speech at the end, where he's like talking about like his philosophy. But like, where was that during the game? He didn't do any of that. Like he's been this like, kind of knob end the whole game, and he's just following his girlfriend around, right? And he's just like, he's just doing what other people tell him. And then all of a sudden he's got this like entire mantra of how he sees the world. And I'm like,
I do love Unity, but there are some significant gaps, especially if you factor in like the multiplayer, like some of the missions he in theory is doing for Napoleon years later, and you think, I appreciate, you know, the writers are they're trying to stretch the canvas over different points in the real history, you know, and it does stretch a little far. But yes, I mean that Arno speech is great, but it doesn't really. See, when I finished Unity, I know you get the speech and he's got the outfit of a master assassin, but the conclusion I took from Arno's character was that he'd be done with it all. He'd seen how everyone suffers in this fight, and I could see him just walking away from everything. So it never really worked for me that he was like, do you know what? I like these Brotherhood people. Sure, they kicked me out, and you know this conflict has killed everyone I know, but yeah, I'll join these guys. Why not? That never quite worked for me. But anyway, we are way off topic. We were talking about Origins, yes.
Yeah. So I have one more tidbit that relates back to kind of like, I'm not exactly sure what it means, but so when I went to E3 2017 for Origins, and as a star player, and one of the things that we did was we walked around this ancient Egypt exhibit in LA, which was awesome. We got to see, you know, these like mummy or not mummy. What are the mummies in? They're in the
sarcophagus.
Painted sarcophagus, yes. And we saw, you know, hieroglyphs on a wall, and these awesome paintings. And one of the pieces was about the myth of Osiris. And so the myth of Osiris, I believe, was something like there's Osiris, and then his brother Set or something. He's murdered. And then he's chopped up into pieces and placed around Egypt or whatever, something like that. And then Osiris's wife finds out that he's dead, but then to bring him back to life, she uses, I believe, his penis or something like that. And she makes a son/clone of Osiris or something like that. And Osiris is reborn. Right. And the historian, Max, was like super excited about this. And he's like, guys, pay attention to this one. You're going to want to pay attention to this. And I'm like, what? Like, okay, Myth of Osiris. Sure. And I'm like, is he like trying to tip off to something? Like, is this going to be something major in Origins? And it doesn't appear at all in Origins. And so I'm like, is it part of the original story? Something like that? I don't know. But that was always something that really
strangest.
Really. Oh, that's right. Because Osiris's son is Horus. That's what it was. Horus, like the eagle-headed guy. And I was like, that's so crazy. Like maybe there's something with that. And you know, it never came up. And so I was like, well, that was, I had a crazy, an entire story around what I thought he meant by that, like how it was going to play out in Origins. Never came to fruition. So, but that always stuck out to me. And, and I was like doing a bunch of like trying to read about it and learn more about it. And So anyways.
It's one of the problems with dabbling into myth, Greek myth, Egyptian myth, whatever, is a lot of the stories are fairly unpleasant. And maybe you don't want to bring that into a video game, whether it's a dream sequence or a playable sequence or whatever. There's certainly plenty of weird enough stories about Zeus and all the rest of it. I think we need to wrap up because it is getting late here in the UK. And Declan, I think you need to go and be a dad, don't you? So why don't we close up with kind of final thoughts on Origins as a game, Origins as a reboot. Where does it fit in your kind of this is for you, Dylan, where do you kind of place Origins overall in the franchise and just in the recent Layla Hassan trilogy?
Gosh, so I mean, like I said, Origins is one of my favorites. I have really tight memories related to it. I have to do with like seeing it early and going to E3 and yada yada. And so like I saw it up on stage when they presented it. So it's very hard for me to be quote unquote unbiased, right? But I really love the atmosphere of that game, and I really love Bayek, the character, even though his arc is a little bleh. But I love his the personality he has and the way he carries himself and his story. I actually do I love the story between him and Hemu, which it was never done in AC. So it's definitely one of my favorites. I think it might be my favorite of the recent three, but I really do like Valhalla. Valhalla I found very satisfying, and I had a lot of fun playing it. And but
I think we need to dive into that because that's interesting. But maybe a story for another time.
I love Origins. I wish that it was more than it met kind of my expectations. Maybe they were too high or what have you, but I really do enjoy that game.
Very good. What about you, Declan? What's your closing thoughts on Origins as a reboot, Origins as a game?
Origins is just epic.
Fair enough.
In my opinion, it finally breathed new life into the series because it had the balls to tell a story that wasn't just your typical Assassins versus Templars. It was there with the Hidden Ones and the Innovations, but it was a different scenario that it told, and it was actually more of an interesting than the past 10 years of the same Assassins vs Templar story. And in my opinion, it kind of gives way to two games that are actually phenomenal, that trying to flesh out the world of Assassin's Creed by not being so fixated on Assassins. So kind of kudos to the game for being good.
Yeah, fair enough. It's certainly not a bad game. I know I've beaten up on it pretty hard in the last 15, 20 minutes. Not a bad game.
Well, you are an Odyssey fan, so
my opinion is worth nothing. I got it. Don't worry. But there's just something I found Odyssey's story more, and I appreciate it does suffer from the same pacing issues as the other open world games, depending on how you approach the story. But I've just found it more compelling. Although it doesn't have, until they added the crossover story, Odyssey does not have a particularly satisfying ending. You've got all these different branches of different stories that you can close at different orders, and it definitely didn't satisfy until they added the crossover at the end of last year. That is the true ending and a very satisfying conclusion. But Origins, it's such a beautiful game. And
yes,
Bayek, his character, his connection to the world, his connection to his people. You make a good point, Dylan, about him and Kemu's relationship. The love he feels for his son is baked into that game, and it is amazing. It's that ending, like 2 hours of story, or maybe probably the last 2 or 3 sort of main memories. You just think, what? Anyway,
they just rush through everything they probably should have went through in the beginning through the rest of the game. Exposition dump.
Exactly. I guess we could say the same every game we could pick apart, and we should celebrate the positive. That's what it is. That's what it is. It is a beautiful game. It is a very enjoyable game. I will say, because I'm a slow learner. I really struggled with the shield. Again, coming from Odyssey, where there's no shield, you just tap parry, and the parry timing window is very generous. I was trying to parry in Origins, and I've mapped all my keys the way I like them, and I couldn't parry. It was only on this replay that I realized you've got to lift that shield up, and then you can parry. But anyway, as I say, I'm a slow learner. But I did grow to enjoy the melee combat, even though it's not flashy. There are no special moves. I mean, even Valhalla has some ridiculous moves, but it's a very straight, very grounded system. But actually, I did come to enjoy it after initially thinking, this is a bit boring. But no, actually, it is satisfying to get right once you get into it. What we should do is we should close this show. But Dylan, if people want to follow you and chat with you, I guess they find you on the subreddit, lurking from time to time.
Yeah, you can on Reddit at Turul TURUL9, and I am also on Twitter as punished_Dill.
Yes, very good.
Which is a very cool Metal Gear reference.
Now, Declan, do you get that reference? Because I must confess, I've never played a Metal Gear game.
Neither have I. Didn't know
oh my god!
Well, okay, now you guys. Now I'm tasking you. You have to go play Metal Gear Solid 5 because that's the greatest stealth game ever made. Period, bar none.
Metal
there
Gear
you go.
Solid 5. All right.
Yes.
Made a note.
Awful, insane story paired with the best stealth mechanics ever made. So, just
all
say.
right.
I'll add it to
Bold
my
statement.
wish list. I've looked at the games I need to buy.
I hear you. Me too.
So
right,
sadly,
Declan,
that is all we got time for tonight. But if you want to play Origins because you've not had a chance yet, why don't you swing by CD Keys where it's currently on sale. $7.99 on PC or $13.99 on Xbox. That is 50% off, so it's cheap, it's fun, it's great, and if you use the link in our description, and if you make purchase CD Keys, it helps out the show just a little bit. If you want to talk to us and celebrate more about Origins, you can email us at Assassin's Creed Let's Talk at gmail.com. I don't know why I forgot my email address. You could also DM us on Twitter at AC Let's Talk or at JSLiquid. And hopefully we'll see you all next week.
See you soon.